Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1051 just came out, and as you can imagine, this was a very polarizing chapter for me. Polarizing why? Well, because on the one hand, this was undeniably a really good chapter. On the other hand, this chapter was also the cutoff point for me saying that the raid is going to fail. If you go back and see previous videos, I said that after chapter 1051, if at that point we do not see Kaido's awakening, Kaido getting out of the volcano, Kaido's flashback picking up, anything like that, then I would have to come out and say, look, it appears as though the raid succeeded. It appears as though the raid did not fail. Keep in mind, internally, I still don't believe that. I still believe what I previously believed. However, externally, I gave my word, this is what I have to say. So from now on, you are not going to hear me saying the raid's going to fail. That rhetoric is over and done with. I will continue to say that it appears as though the raid succeeded. Unless something drastically changes in the story, it appears as though the raid succeeded. Now, if that statement is not concrete enough for you, then just wait a little bit. If the night ends, the scene clearly ends, we cut to the next scene, the battle, we're leaving that behind, and there's nothing more to be done, Wano is liberated, then yes, at that point, obviously, I would more concretely come out with a video basically being like, look, the raid succeeded, it did not fail. Here is probably the full progression of my thoughts, breaking down how things played out, my overall thoughts on this and this whole journey from start to finish, because it's been quite a journey. So I'll get that out, and also at that point I've got some bets to pay off. So the Grand Line Review, Sensei Inc., and Eric Torlato of the Red Force podcast. And at that point, look, I think I'll have to move on, and I guess you other raid fail believers will also have to move on as well. Hopefully we can all move on together. Beyond that, let's talk about this chapter, because as I said, this was a really, really good chapter. But before we get into it, make sure to check out Scarlet Vixen, a webtoon by Christian Torlato, who's a member of the One Piece community, a really prominent member. He runs the Red Force podcast, and he's a talented artist. Check it out. He submitted it for competition, so it's kind of a big deal. It's a good first chapter, and any number of views helps it do better in the competition. You can also sub and like to help it do even better. So check that out, link in the description below. Last chapter did throw me for a bit of a loop because it was constructed so very differently from the way Oda normally does these sort of, I guess, breather moments where everyone's letting out their emotions, everyone's kind of soaking in what just happened. Tyrant is overthrown, bad guys defeated. It seems as though the nation, island, village, whatever we normally have is liberated. Usually those chapters are very, very emotional and generally constructed, I guess, more dramatically than what we got in chapter 1050. 1050 kind of felt like, I guess, I would compare it to sort of a balloon slowly letting out air, which is like, hey guys, I just saw from the window that Luffy won, and then Scabbard's walking over to the town and being like, you're never gonna believe this. So it was a little different. It was not the Dressrosa finish, it was not the Skypiea finish, the Arlong Park finish, not even the Thriller Bark finish. That's what threw me for a bit of a loop last chapter, and why I didn't enjoy last chapter anywhere near as much as this chapter, because this chapter, we did actually get quite a dramatic reveal for the 9 Scabbards return, for Momonosuke's return, and for generally the idea that basically this curse of Kaido and Orochi has been lifted from the land. So I had previously said in other videos that the idea of them walking over and just telling them that, hey, this stuff is wrapped up, would not be dramatic. It was hard for me to believe that something like that could be dramatic. I was definitely wrong on that, because I think that this chapter, Oda did it just about as well as that idea can be done. That just coming over and telling people in the middle of the party that, hey, the bad guy is defeated. Everything from the scene direction, with really, really good use of mist, fog, etc., to the paneling, with some really, really, really good spreads. I think in particular, obviously, all of the Scabbards bowing as Momonosuke walks through them, and Momonosuke himself's reveal. I don't know, it felt very, very, very well done, and it felt like Oda was really, really giving us that same sort of energy that we get at the end of other arcs, such as Skypiea, such as Dressrosa, such as Arlong Park. Previously mentioned stuff, I'm just not going to keep going through the list again. You guys get what I'm saying. So this chapter, I think, definitely hit. Oda definitely built to the reveal of Momonosuke really, really well. I think it was a really good idea that, like, a lot of us had been wanting for some time to just show us Momonosuke, because in my head, and I think in a lot of other people's, as soon as we heard that, oh, he looks like Odin, I think a lot of us believed that, like, it's going to be similar to the way Hiyori looks exactly like Toki or something along those lines. But no, Momo does look like Odin in a sense. But let's be honest, Momo looks way more badass than Odin ever did. I think when we got Odin's first design reveal, I think a lot of us weren't as, like, not many of us basically had him marked down as a super badass character. I mean, his hair is quirky looking, but it's not exactly, awe-inspiring or anything like that. Whereas Momonosuke's panel, I think that this was genuinely one of the best panels in Wano in general, period. And I think that this was actually one of the best character design reveals that we've ever gotten throughout all of One Piece. The slow build up through it, the lining up of the scabbards revealing themselves to the people one by one, the fog, etc. I thought Momonosuke's reveal was great. More importantly, it was marked by an excellent speech by Momonosuke. So I'm a little thrown by this as well because as far as we know, obviously Momonosuke is still an 8-year-old. He is still the same personality that we knew. Still that same personality, still thinks the same way, still speaks the same way in theory. The narrator box even reminds us that, look, he is still technically 8, but the speech that he just gave was one of the best speeches in One Piece. That's a King Riku type speech. That's a Vivi at the end of Alabasta type speech. That's Momonosuke speaking way beyond his years. That is not the type of dialogue I've seen from Momonosuke, I think, at any point throughout Wano. And Momo's had some good lines and moments, right? The moment that he announced his name here is obviously a callback to him announcing that when he was up on the cross with Kaido and everything like that, which was another good moment. But it hits so much harder here, not just because of his design, but because of that long and actually really well-spoken and articulate speech that he gave beforehand. So, or at least surrounding it, right? The context. So I'm a little suspicious of Oda basically saying, I'm not like I'm not buying it, but I also think Oda is factually writing his dialogue a little bit differently, even though he's supposed to be an 8-year-old and has the mind of an 8-year-old and personality of an 8-year-old still. I'm just going to call it like I see it. This was not how Momonosuke used to speak. He's speaking like a grown adult type leader at this moment. And you can say that's the maturity that comes from this war and everything like that. But at the same time, the fact that it's lining up with this design and everything like that, it does feel like Momonosuke as a character is drastically different than what he was being written like and how he sounded like when he was 8 years old. So new Momonosuke, I can get behind. Cool character, cool design. Cool, I guess, ability to fake it till you make it, or however Kinemon basically put it, because that speech was 10 out of 10. So I enjoyed all of that. I think it was great that Oda devoted a full chapter to basically reintroducing us to Kazuki Momonosuke. I think the standout for this chapter actually for me though was Tama, because Tama's flashback it's good that we got it at the end of the day. It's something that I definitely wish we could have gotten a lot earlier. Just because Tama's flashback was actually, it's one of the sadder flashbacks. I mean, you can line it up with other things like Yamato's flashback and things like that. And I think Tama has arguably the saddest individual character flashback that we've gotten in Wano period. You can compare it to a few others, I suppose, but I actually thought that was a really, really good flashback. And sure, it hit really well here in this context with Tama, like, we're finally finding out basically what she went through and what she was just liberated from. But I would have loved to have gotten that earlier as well, because up till now, Tama's been, a fairly upbeat, optimistic, happy girl. It would have been nice if I think we'd learned a little bit earlier, basically, just in general, what she had been through. And I think in general, for a lot of these Wano flashbacks that we've been getting a lot more recently with Toko and Yasue, the Wano citizens in general in chapter 1048, Tama just now, I personally think it would have been great if we had gotten a lot of this stuff spread out earlier through the arc while they're fighting for the sake of Wano, so we kind of know what they're fighting for as they're doing it, rather than kind of at the climactic part and I guess like a little bit post-climax basically finding out like, hey, this was really bad what happened to her or him, etc., etc. But that's a very, very, very minor note, because I did think that Tama's flashback was a really, really good, I'd say the best part, probably the best part of an otherwise already really, really fantastic chapter. And I will say this, the scabbards and what they mean to the people of Wano, I'll say at the very least, this chapter made me feel more for their significance and kind of what they symbolize to the people of Wano than any previous chapter did. Because I think this chapter, most of it I would attribute to the direction and kind of Oda stepping it up in the scene direction department for this chapter specifically. But the presentation of the scabbards and the weight behind showing them one by one individually and the people's reactions, it did hit in a way that I think the scabbards presence had not hit for me, I think, for a long, long time. So this chapter, I think, start to finish, really, really, really well done. Small little things here and there, basically addressing, I don't know why Ashura Doji, I couldn't get a full count of the scabbards, I think, but it looked like almost everyone was there. It looks like Ashura is still missing for some reason. Yamato asking to join the crew. I think a lot of people are going crazy over that, like Yamato's joining the crew, blah, 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 confirmed. But this scene, I think, was literally no different from anything that we'd previously seen or known, which is just that Yamato says a lot that she's going to join the crew. Whether or not Luffy lets her, whether or not that's confirmed, that is still to be determined. She's been saying she wants to join the crew for the longest time. This chapter was really nothing new, just reminding us of that. Beyond that, I don't think that there's that much that you can say about this chapter other than really, really good execution. I think that this is a finishing chapter, if it is the finishing chapter. Well, catch myself there. This finishing chapter of Wano is up there with, I think, a lot of Oda's other finishing chapters. I think that this lines up and sits perfectly next to the ending chapters of Dressrosa, ending chapters of Skypiea, yada yada, you get the gist. So that's all for this week's video. You can get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics in my Patreon, link in the description below. Talk to y'all later.